Once again, thank you everyone for logging into the Inclusive Finance India Summit 2021. This is the final session for the summit and for the night. We have with us Mr. Alkesh Wadhwani, Director Poverty Alleviation India, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for our valedictory address. Thank you, Alkesh, and I would thank you for joining us, and I would hand over the charge to you.
Thank you, Priyambada. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here at the IFI Summit and be asked to invited to speak here. I'll say a few words about financial inclusion. So as all the members and audience knows, India has made significant strides in financial inclusion in the past few years, thanks to a committed government, a dynamic regulator, and an innovative financial service provider ecosystem. What I'd like to do is to spend the next few minutes to talk about three areas we can all focus on to help accelerate usage and help poor people and women become more resilient. Earlier in this summit, Dr. Rajiv Kumar spoke about women's economic and financial inclusion. And the first area I'd like to talk about is gender inclusive financial services, including gender disaggregated data. The second one is addressing needs of small and marginal farmers, because perhaps this is the largest segment of the poor in India. And the third is building trust and confidence in low-income consumers. And this is all the more important given the way financial services is going digital. Junaid also spoke about this, about a customer protection and strong grievance redressal framework. So I think it resonates for this audience. Let me first begin by talking about the gender inclusive financial services. So India has made significant progress in ensuring equitable financial inclusion over the last few years. We all know that 430 million economically disadvantaged Indians have benefited from PMJDY accounts, literally in the last 5-6 years. Women account for more than 55% of these accounts, and the gender gap has actually reduced from 20% to 6% today in financial inclusion. Further, the NFHS 5 survey that just came out reported that overall in India, about 76% of women report having a bank or savings account that they themselves used, up from 53% in 2015-16. And for rural India, this jumped from 48.5 to 77.4%. So clearly huge progress for women in financial inclusion. So you may wonder why I'm focusing on this topic. But however, if you take a closer look, what we find is that there still is 11% gender gap. And that's because many of the accounts are still dormant. And you could see that especially for women account holders, including that women's user experience in using financial services remains difficult. Financial inclusion, as we know, goes much beyond accounts that I'm talking about, bank accounts and the usage of those accounts, only with equal opportunity to a full range of services, whether it's savings, credit, insurance, and payments, and the accompanying financial education, do women stand a better chance of social and economic empowerment. India's goals to complete financial inclusion won't be complete if women continue to be excluded. Here are a few things that we could start doing to ensure that women start accruing the welfare benefits of using digital financial services. The first is designed for women. Traditionally, financial services and products have been gender agnostic. Women face several challenges that are different from men, and we should acknowledge and address these challenges and gaps. So we should endeavor to make products gender intentional and with compelling value propositions that can help women give more agency over money. The second is build capability and capacity of women customers. So women have poor access to mobile phones, higher illiteracy, constrained mobility, and they also face a greater gender divide. Our work in India, for example, work we do with NREGA and with other parts of the world, for example, with ready-made garment workers in Bangladesh, have shown that when women know how to use the products and are literate about them and understand the value propositions, they tend to become part of the workforce and start using digital tools themselves. So this is actually quite powerful, because saying that if digital tools are available and used well and understood well, women are more likely to work in the workforce. So, it's important that we get women the financial services and tools they need. The third is to give women more livelihood opportunities. The gender agnostic approach that we have today manifests in a low presence of women in financial services delivery itself. So if you see, and I've got slightly old data here, in 2014, women accounted for only 22% of overall employment in all scheduled commercial banks in India. If you take microfinance, where like 98%, effectively 100% of the clients are women, only 11% are employed by, only 11% of women are part of the total workforce of the microfinance sector. So effectively 90% are men in the microfinance sector, despite the fact that they're serving women. Similarly, it's estimated that women constitute about 10% of the banking correspondent agents in India, whereas perhaps the customers may be at least 40%. So again, a great opportunity to increase the percentage of women and get livelihood opportunities for women in this industry and sector itself. And the last is to collect and act on gender disaggregated data. One of the important aspects that can nudge gender inclusive systems is availability of gender disaggregated data. Currently, no such data is available except for a couple of surveys. If stakeholders can ensure that critical KPIs covering access, usage and quality of services for women are available and are separately reported, this can trigger a major impact in how to improve or reduce the exclusion of women from the financial services. I'll now move to the next point of the three that I plan to talk about, which is addressing the need of small and marginal farmers. So the poor and rural communities are often the most difficult and expensive to reach by traditional service providers. But unfortunately, that is where most of our farmers live and work. Small and marginal farmers or small-scale producers account for 86% of all holdings and about 50% of the operated areas. They contribute, therefore, about 50% of the output. But they struggle to get access to formal financial services. They also face other challenges as they may not have the collateral to offer to any formal lender. I'd obviously like to acknowledge the Kisan Credit Card, which the government launched and which has got tens of millions or perhaps of users. So it is a step in the direction of getting credit without collateral to the small farmers, but a lot more can be done. So what's changed, of course, is that digital technologies are making it easier for partners in different industries to merge knowledge, processes, and products. On the financial side, fintechs are developing app-based products tailored to customer needs. And financial institutions and telecoms are exploring how to open their APIs to third-party providers to add more services to their existing platforms. In addition, payment companies are also developing machine learning models that improve their understanding of customer needs and cash flows. These approaches allow for the collection of multiple data points to develop better risk underwriting tools that can enable new lending mechanisms. So I think all this is well known, but how do we really use this to help small and marginal farmers? So if we are able to pool all these capacity through cross-industry partnerships, there is a greater potential to reach more small-scale farmers and producers. However, these partnerships are not easy to establish as there are significant transaction and opportunity costs for all the players involved. For example, a major challenge is for smaller and agile fintechs offering tech-based solutions to integrate with existing legacy systems of large banks. Hence, we, the entire ecosystem, need to work together to serve the needs of this segment in a viable and sustainable way. And this can only happen if both banks and fintechs come together at a much larger scale than today to serve the small-scale producers. The last point I'd really like to talk about is building trust and confidence. One of the reasons that the poor rural communities and women do not adopt digital formal financial services is that they often lack trust and confidence in the new tools. Growing digitization brings with it its new unique risk for customers that may not exist in traditional markets. So as technology changes how individuals engage with formal finance, the gap in literacy versus access can lead to many, many risks, including fraud, digital profiling, and exclusion from coverage. I'm sure this is true for all of us. Certainly, I have received multiple calls, emails, text messages saying if I go to some site, I can get some rewards, and then they ask you for your details. And every day you read in the newspaper of how somebody or the other has been frauded because they, without realizing it, give away confidential information through which their money can be taken away from their accounts. So the challenges with digital financial services, things have become more risky, and we need to see how to address some of these risks. Customer protection is key to address the trust deficit. While the RBI has announced the One Country, One Ombudsman scheme, more can be done, especially by the service providers. Building digital trust and confidence is paramount to increase usage, and customer protection measures form the cornerstone of this transformation from a demand side perspective. A strong pro-poor customer protection regime is key to ensure that digital financial services benefit vulnerable and traditionally financially excluded populations, enabling them to make well-informed decisions on how best to use financial services, building trust in the formal financial sector, and contributing to innovative and competitive financial markets. So how do we do this? It is essential to create an enabling environment for developing a customer-centric financial system by instituting mechanisms for addressing information asymmetries between the providers and consumers of financial services. This is not easy. I don't think there are any silver bullets. At the foundation, we are working to create evidence and test a suite of fit-for-purpose interventions in India that can help build customer trust in the digital financial ecosystem for poor customers. So to summarize, providing gender inclusive financial services, addressing the needs of small and marginal farmers, and building trust and confidence in low-income consumers will lead to increased usage of formal financial services and build a more resilient family, community, and society. I hope all of you had useful conversations and learnings during the last 2 days, and we hope that together we can help everyone get financially included in India and lead healthy and productive lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alkesh, for such a crisp summary of the 2 days sessions. And thank you for also providing us with very useful recommendations. With this, I would also like to thank all the delegates who've stayed logged in till this late in the night. And I will not take too much of your time and do a quick vote of thanks. Thank you, Alkesh.
Thank you.
So with the 18th Inclusive Finance India